everyone, Crisis here, and holy sh**, the boy is coming back.
Hello, Peter.
Now, I know that the internet is already flooded with Raimi fanboys and guilty as charged. These movies were my childhood, but not just that, not just the movies. I remember renting the Spider-Man 1 and 2 movie games for the original Xbox. I remember playing Friend or Foe on co-op with my neighbor. I remember getting the special edition of Spider-Man 3 with the prequel comic written and illustrated by the Ultimate Spider-Man Dream Team Bendis and Bagley. I remember it all, and I couldn't help myself from reliving it all in the hype of Tobey Maguire's upcoming return to the Red and Blues. Now, with all that said, what we have here is a celebration of all things Spider-Man from 2002 to 2007. Having reread, replayed, and re-experienced all things associated with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, I decided to bring you guys along for the ride by power scaling the composite version of the Raimiverse's Spider-Man. Now, what exactly is a composite version? Well, a comp character is essentially an amalgamation of every version of said character, taking into account all of their feats and statements to essentially create the ultimate version of said character. What that looks like for this version of Spider-Man is any product brandishing this here is on the table. Any piece of material that contradicts the whole and simply couldn't possibly fit into the canon is accepted into the comp. Every game, comic, guide, action figure, educational program, it's all valid. And I will be going over the symbiote-imbued black suit, seeing as it amps all of Spider-Man's statistics, with Peter being able to switch between his classic red and blues and black suit on the fly in the Spider-Man 3 PS2 game. As per usual, any source for any feats or statements will be shown on screen, and any calculations used will be linked in the description. So, with the preamble behind us, let's begin by looking at Spider-Man's attack potency and durability. But before we get into that, I would like to mention that I have started a Patreon. Pledge between just $5, $10, or $15, and you can receive perks such as a shout out at the end of every video, early access to content such as my MCU/DCEU crossover fanfiction video series, the ability to vote on polls regarding the content of future videos, live streams of the behind the making of my videos, and more. Any amount you pledge would go towards both ensuring the quality and frequency of my content and would be a huge help to me personally. Links to the Patreon will be on screen, in the description, and on my YouTube page. Thank you so much and enjoy. Sam Raimi's interpretation of our favorite webhead solidly sits in the building range of attack potency, seeing as a single pumpkin bomb was able to vaporize both Eddie Brock and the symbiote. Even accounting for just Eddie Brock, reducing a human being down to ash would require small building, or between 0.005 and 0.25 tons of TNT levels of energy. Peter, of course, tanked a point-blank pumpkin bomb to the face, and scales above Harry Osborn, someone who endured similar punishment with similar results. The expanded Raimiverse as well provides a consistency for this scaling, with Friend or Foe even showcasing Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery tanking 3 simultaneous pumpkin bomb explosions. And heck, it even took 10 of the things to bring down a mind-controlled Green Goblin. In the pages of the Daily Bugle stories, it is stated that the bank vault door that Doc Ock effortlessly ripped apart and tossed aside was built to withstand a tank round at close range. The M1 Abrams, a fairly standard military tank, fires shells possessing kinetic energy equivalent to 23.6 megajoules, or again, small building. Doc Ock's arms are also able to endure a sustained electric shock from cables designed to power his personal sun. Seeing as the first star required over 1,000 megawatts to create, with Otto's second attempt surpassing this amount, seeing how it became self-sustaining. Converting watts to joules, we get 1 × 10 to the 9 joules, or around building level. Multiplied by the overall time Otto endured this amount of energy, we get 9 × 10 to the 9th joules, or large building level. Spider-Man is of course able to withstand and counter strikes from Ock's mechanical arms. Not to mention the fact that Spider-Man and New Goblin scale to Sandman's giant form, seeing as he's a 500-ton building-sized monster in the final act of Spider-Man 3, he would be building level through sheer size alone. Spider-Man as well scales to Oscorp's ultimate weapon, being able to withstand its various forms of munitions. This robot should, based on its name alone, upscale from Goblin's missiles which busted the Quest aerospace weapons testing bunker. Seeing as bunkers are designed to endure the testing of standard military armaments, I think it's fair to scale this missile above the number of standard bombs, with the super mech's weaponry likely scaling above Goblin's own specialized vaporization bombs, shown to disintegrate up to 6 people, meaning these bombs possess an attack potency of building level proportions. Also, Green Goblin blatantly states that he wouldn't be able to take Spider-Man in a fair fight, and thus formulates a plan to exhaust him to secure a victory. So Osborn probably doesn't even think any of his building level weaponry would be able to put down a fresh out of the gate Spider-Man anyways. For this next point, I have to tip my hat to Nairobi for providing this calculation. I'll have Naya's Twitter account linked in the description, check him out. Swinging back to Pier 56, Peter is able to toss this warehouse wall about 3 meters towards the ground. This wall being pulled by Otto's star, the same star pulling everything not tied down in all of New York City. Further explanation of that coming later. Here, Spider-Man is able to exert an amount of force on an object which already has its landing determined by the gravitational pull of the gravity well of the star. So to overpower that pull as much as Peter did would require, at a low end, over 300 billion joules or city block level plus. And keep in mind, Spider-Man constantly holds back his full power against crooks, even when facing a foe as deadly as the Vulture.
Lucky for you, I pull my punches.
So, Spider-Man's full unrestrained power is likely higher than what we can currently determine. By the events of Friend or Foe, the Black Suit would grant a massive power boost, allowing him to one-shot enemies that he posed zero threat to prior to merging with the symbiote. Oh yeah, and Venom in the Spider-Man 3 Junior novelization says he can crush mountains, with Peter scaling to the symbiote. This is pretty clearly hyperbole, especially considering the same novel refers to the building-sized Sandman as a mountain, so I'll leave the mountain-level Spidey arguments up to you guys. Now, I don't typically cover lifting strength in my scaling videos since how much a character can lift doesn't really factor into an actual combative scenario. But seeing as webs are a standard part of Spider-Man's arsenal, and they directly correlate to Peter's lifting strength, seeing how they almost always hold under Peter's pulling, it is an entirely valid win condition for Spider-Man to simply web up his opponent, leaving them restrained unless they can exert more energy than the webs could endure. So, I see it fit to determine just how much force can Peter's muscles and webs withstand. He of course halts multiple New York City train cars, stopping over 300,000 pounds over the course of about a minute and a half, landing his lifting strength in the range between 10 to 25 metric tons. His webs can prop up a leaking water tower, the average building top water tower storing up to 10,000 gallons or 13 tons of water. Spidey can as well hold up an antenna mast, which should weigh at least 225 tons based on other antennas in New York City. Spidey, as well, fights against the gravitational pull of Doc Ock's star, both to prevent MJ from being sucked in and while lifting a side of the warehouse being ever pulled by this fusion reaction. However, scaling any feats based on this star is a bit tricky, seeing as, in reality, a sun of this size would crush the entire planet into itself 3 times over. So instead of saying Spidey can pull against 3 planet Earths, let's look at what the star actually does. I've got to thank Nairobi again for the following calc, but essentially the novelization of Spider-Man 2 states that the pull of the star was being felt all throughout New York City, and that anything not being nailed down would eventually be sucked into the fusion reaction. And after adding up everything that fits those parameters, like cars, signs, people, pets, we get 11,488,946.25 tons at the low end, So Spider-Man, mere feet away from the source of this gravitational pull, was contending with and overpowering the force of this small star, with Spider-Man's proximity to the fusion reaction only making the feat that much more impressive. And remember, Spider-Man was put in an especially motivating position, protecting Mary Jane. Goblin in the first movie essentially had his way with a heavily fatigued Spider-Man, but even after just mentioning Mary Jane, Spider-Man immediately gains the upper hand, pummeling Osborn. The Spider-Man 2 novel even has a moment paraphrasing Amazing Spider-Man number 33, with Peter drawing on his deepest reserves of willpower to overcome and toss the warehouse wall, stated to be growing ever heavier under the fusion reaction's attraction. So Peter getting unbelievably more powerful under stress is consistent, at least when protecting the love of his life. The symbiote would naturally amp Spider-Man's overall strength, showcasing these effects as, while wearing the black suit, Spidey could effortlessly toss around the train car
like it was a softball!
The webhead manages to easily evade gunfire, landing him in the supersonic range of speed. He is as well able to dodge electricity, both in the form of Electro's lightning blasts and plasma bolts fired from Doc Ock's man-made star. Most forms of electricity move at speeds ranging from 50% to 100% of the speed of light. Consistency for this range of speed would be multiple speed of lightning statements, both from merchandise as well as the Spider-Man 3 Junior novel. The higher ends of this range are enforced through Spidey's evasion of both the lasers of Oscorp's ultimate weapon, the Super Mech, and the Scorpion's plasma laser tail. And sure, Spider-Man possesses precognition to assist him in the dodging of oncoming threats, but here we have someone who can dodge lasers through his precog, who then battles people lacking precog, who can still combat against Peter's speed of light precognition, so no matter how you slice it, Spidey's a light timer. Case closed. The symbiote would further increase Spider-Man's combat and reaction speeds.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boy.
The secondary material of the Raimiverse paints Spider-Man as a far more skilled combatant than he appears to be on film. He is able to sneak through the shadows of a warehouse filled with alert gang members, as well as away from a spotlight-lit warehouse full of trained police officers, all wielding flashlights. He is able to combat various waves of aerial opponents, chief of all being the Vulture, a master of flight. He can go toe-to-toe with the Green Goblin, with his Emerald enemy stating that Spider-Man boasts tremendous skill.
Thanks to you, your skill is tremendous.
He can disarm numerous bombs, fight off 50 high-flying razor bats, successfully evade the superhuman senses of the Green Goblin. He can hack into Oscorp's security systems, defeat waves of androids reciting the US Marine mantra of
Adapt, react, and overcome.
Outsmart the advanced, actively adapting appendages of Otto Octavius. He was able to best Kraven, the self-proclaimed
World's greatest hunter.
while in a poisoned, nerfed state.
Yes, some kind of poison. Better catch Jungle Boy and find the antidote, and fast.
With the Spider later besting a Kraven amped by the powers and abilities of various animals. He was able to best Mysterio, an illusionist boasting the abilities of teleportation, duplication, ranged attacks, and size manipulation. Spider-Man as well provides amazing examples of environmental combat, using sound waves against Venom, provoking Rhino into destabilizing the platform on which Shocker was standing on, baiting Ock's tentacles into stabbing through electric cables, and, chief of all, Parker's martial prowess. Spider-Man employs a custom style of combat, combining fast-paced punches and kicks to bring down foes of far greater stature than his own. He scales above Puma, an expert martial artist with extrasensory powers equal to that of Spider-Man's, the Dragon Tail Gang, a martial arts-based crime organization, and Iron Fist, with fodder symbiote phantoms being able to restrain the
master of the Kunlun martial arts.
Not to mention that Spider-Man is as well able to defeat various Mysterio-crafted duplicates of himself. This iteration of the Amazing Spider-Man boasts a wide array of powers and abilities, his two primary superpowers being his extrasensory perception, known as spider sense, and his versatile ability to fire a practically inexhaustible amount of web fluid out of his wrists. To cover the former, Peter's spider sense is incredibly robust, as described in the Spider-Man 1 movie game strategy guide. It's a proximity-based threat detection system, triggered by oncoming supervillains or general threats, such as an unstable surface. It grants Peter a form of precognition, aiding his reflexes, allowing him to react to all manner of attacks, even when asleep, as the ability grants Peter unconscious movement. He doesn't even need to think to react. This power also aids in tracking, allowing Peter to see trails undetectable to the human eye or even to Peter's perfect standard vision. It can identify foes, either cast in shadow or rendered completely invisible. Peter's spider sense can further assist in the tracking of a specific target, either a person or an item, raising in intensity when nearing Peter's chosen prey. Spider-Man's ESP even grants him an omnidirectional understanding of his immediate surroundings, being able to take in events happening rooms, rooftops, or city blocks away with total clarity. This sense is so refined that it can even cycle person to person at a time to identify who among them poses a threat. It's always incredibly difficult to fool, with Peter subconsciously recognizing the redeemed Otto Octavius as no longer a threat, even as Otto grips Peter with a metal arm. As far as the wall crawler's web-based abilities are concerned, he can fire them in a straight line, allowing for web slinging. He can coat his body in a layer of protective webbing, only to then burst out of the cocoon, creating a small area of effect shockwave. He can coat his fists in the web fluid to create a kind of web brass knuckles. He can fire impact webbing in the form of dense web bullets. With his webs, he can create a fireproof shield, parachutes, safety nets, and tripwires. Not to mention, he can generally just swing goons all around. Spider-Man as well possesses a form of stat renewal through willpower. Essentially, it's an anime-type power-up where, if provoked or sufficiently motivated, he can quickly turn the tide of battle, as shown in his final fight against the Green Goblin. Spider-Man is also an extremely intelligent opponent, impressing masters of science Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius, with the latter recognizing Peter as one of the smartest people in all of America. On top of that, the agility of Spider-Man is a marvel to behold. Boasting skills greater than that of Olympic gymnasts, Spider-Man can flip, roll, and twirl his way around various obstacles. His powers of adhesion would as well provide him with perfect balance, allowing him to cling to all kinds of surfaces. The black suit would further bolster Peter's autonomous movement, grant Spider-Man an unprecedented reserve of stamina, and likely correlate his willpower-based power boost to his increased rage. To tie this section into the prior one, co-producer of the Raimi films, Grant Curtis, stated that Peter possesses a level of mastery over his abilities by Spider-Man 2.
As much as he's mastered his skills as Spider-Man, as Peter Parker, his life is unraveling because Spider-Man, at least the way he's taking on the mantle, is becoming a full-time job.
Showing that Peter had perfected both his skills and powers at that point in his career. But before we wind down here, and this doesn't really impact the scaling, but No Way Home won't be the first time an iteration of Tobey's Spidey would cross paths with his variants. As in Spider-Verse Volume 1 Number 2, he was stated to have battled the Inheritors alongside Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and would have likely rematched Morlund's crew in Spider-Geddon Number 5, reuniting with the Amazing Spider-Man and even crossing paths with the MCU's Spider-Man. So, to sum it all up, the composite version of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man possesses feats in the building, large building, and city block ranges of power, reaction speeds at least relative to the speed of light, if not faster, masterful skill in stealth, athleticism, fields of technology and fighting abilities, webs that can be used in practically endless ways and combinations, being able to endure up to 11.5 million tons, incredibly robust extrasensory and precognitive powers, and various ways to improve his stats on the fly, either through intense willpower or unleashing his inner darkness. And there we have it, the complete power scale for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. until No Way Home likely scales the canon Raimiverse to Tom Holland's power level. Thanks so much for coming along with me through this journey all the way back to 2002. I hope this video not only reminded you of the greatness of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, but also took you back to that era of Spider-Man material and merchandise. I know I certainly spent many hours playing these games and reading these comics in my childhood, and I couldn't miss the opportunity to relive it as we get closer and closer to seeing our hero back on the big screen. And if you guys would like to see who would win between the canon versions of the 3 cinematic Spider-Man, I collaborated over at Key Issues to answer that very question. So give that a watch if you haven't gotten your fill of Spider-Man discussion. As always, you can support the creation of content like this by liking and subscribing. Thanks, and I'll see you all in theaters on December 25th. And remember, with great
power comes great responsibility. Remember that, Pete. Remember that.